The Grand Assembly Hall on Telesar Prime was the oldest building in the known galaxy. Its walls were made of living crystal that hummed with the memories of 10,000 years of diplomacy, treaties, and peace. 42 species had built their hopes inside this hall. 42 flags hung from the ceiling, each one representing a civilization that had chosen unity over war. Today the hall smelled like fear. High Chancellor Selara Voss stood at the central platform, her feathered crest flat against her skull. She was Karethi, a species of tall, bird-like people known for their calm voices and sharp minds. In her 60 years of political life, she had never raised her voice in this chamber. She had never needed to. Diplomacy was her weapon, and it had always been enough. But diplomacy could not stop what was coming, and the holographic display above the platform flickered to life, and the face of Admiral Torak Jean filled the air. He was Drathari, a massive creature with 6 limbs and skin like gray stone. He was the finest military commander the Council had ever produced. He had won 37 battles across 4 decades of service. His eyes, usually sharp and confident, were hollow. "Chancellor," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. "The combined defense fleet has been destroyed." The hall went silent, not the polite silence of diplomats waiting their turn to speak. This was the silence of people who had just heard their death sentence. The Battle of the Yanari Corridor lasted 9 hours, Jean continued. We committed 6,000 warships, every class, every reserve. The Vraxith Dominion broke through our formation in the first 2 hours. After that, it was not a battle, it was a slaughter. Voss gripped the edge of her platform. Survivors. Fewer than 300 ships made it out. Most are damaged beyond repair. Jean paused. His massive hands trembled. "Chancellor, the Yanari Corridor was our last defensive line." And GT snorts. And GT. There is nothing between the Vraxith Armada and our core worlds, nothing. The hall erupted. Ambassador Dryfinov, the Lyracy Collective, was the first to stand. He was a small amphibian creature with wet gray skin and large black eyes. His voice was high and sharp. "We must negotiate. The Vraxith have shown willingness to accept surrender in exchange for territorial concessions. If we offer them the outer colonies, perhaps they will stop." "They will not stop," Admiral Jean said flatly. "The Vraxith do not want territory, they want biomass. Every world they conquer, they consume. Every species they defeat, they absorb into their hive. There is no negotiation with a species that sees you as food." The Feldari ambassador, a tall being made of crystalline segments, spoke. "Next, then we evacuate the Feldari Consortium has already begun moving our population to deep space stations beyond the galactic rim. We suggest all Council species do the same." "Run where?" Jean growled. "The galaxy is not infinite. The Vraxith will follow. They always follow." Boss raised her hand and the hall fell quiet again. She was not a military leader. She was not a warrior, but she was the Chancellor, and in this moment, every eye in the chamber turned to her. "Then how long do we have?" she asked. Jean's holographic image shifted. A star map appeared showing a massive red swarm moving through Council space like blood spreading through water. At their current speed, the Vraxith Grand Armada will reach the inner Colonies in 40 days, Telusar Prime in 60. They number approximately 40,000. Warships Chancellor, we have nothing that can stop them. 40,000. Boss let the number sink into her bones. The Council's entire military, at its peak, had fielded 12,000 ships. And those were gone now, burning in the void of the Inari corridor. The session dissolved into chaos. Species that had been allies for centuries turned on each other. The Jathari blamed the Lyra Sea for underfunding the military. One, the Lyra Sea blamed the Feldari for refusing to share their advanced shield technology. The Sindari sat in silence, watching everything with their pale, translucent eyes, saying nothing. Voss let them argue. She had learned long ago that fear made people loud before it made them quiet. Eventually the shouting would stop and the real decisions would begin. It was during this chaos that Magistrate Ethio requested a private audience. Ethio was Sindari, and like all her kind, she was unsettling to look at, tall and impossibly thin, with skin so pale you could see the faint blue glow of her veins beneath it. The Sindari were psychics, capable of reading emotional fields and processing information at speeds that made up species look like children. Ethio served as the Council's chief of intelligence, and she was very good at her job. She did not look good today. Chancellor, Ethio said, her voice barely above a whisper. They were alone in Voss's private chamber, far from the screaming delegates. I need to show you something that does not fit any of our current threat models. She placed a data crystal on the table. A holographic display bloomed from it, showing a section of space that Voss recognized immediately: the quarantine zone, a vast dark region of the galaxy that the Council had avoided for as long as anyone could remember. Old laws written by civilizations that no longer existed forbade any species from entering it. Our deep space sensor arrays along the quarantine border have been detecting anomalies for the past 72 hours, Eth-Il said. Subspace distortions, massive ones, here, or an A, and here. She pointed to 3 locations along the border, each one pulsed with a soft red light. Vraxith scouts, Voss asked. No. Energy signatures do not match any known Vraxith technology. They do not match any known technology at all. Eth-Il paused. Chancellor, something is moving inside the quarantine zone. Something very large, and it is moving toward the border. Voss stared at the display. The quarantine zone had been sealed for over 4,000 years. The species that had established the quarantine, the Valori, had gone extinct long before the current Council was formed. Their records were fragmentary, most of them encrypted or deliberately destroyed. All that remained were warnings: do not enter, do not make contact, the species within is dangerous beyond measure. No one had ever taken those warnings seriously. Voss, the quarantine zone was considered dead space, empty, a relic of ancient paranoia. It is probably sensor interference, Voss said. The Vraxith use subspace jamming technology. It could be causing false readings. I considered that, Eth-Il replied. But the distortions are too large and too organized to be interference. They are moving in formation, Chancellor. Whatever is in there, it is not random. It is deliberate. Voss felt something cold crawl up her spine. She was a diplomat. She dealt in words and intentions, but even she could recognize the shape of something she did not understand, and that scared her more than the Vraxith ever had. Keep monitoring, she said, but say nothing to the full council. We have enough panic already, as Il nodded and left. Voss stood alone in her chamber. For a long time, X staring at the holographic map. The red swarm of the Vraxith was closing in from one side, and from the other side, from the dark and silent quarantine zone, something else was stirring. She thought about the old Valori warnings, dangerous beyond measure. What kind of species would frighten a civilization powerful enough to seal an entire region of the galaxy? She pushed the thought away. There were more immediate problems. Vraxith were real, the quarantine anomalies were probably nothing. Probably 3 hours later, a priority signal arrived from the border. A council scout ship, the small patrol vessel Windsong, had been stationed along the edge of the quarantine zone for routine monitoring. Its crew of 12 had been sending regular reports for months, boring reports. Nothing ever happened on the quarantine border. The signal was garbled, broken by interference that the communications team could not explain. They managed to extract a partial audio log. The voice belonged to the Windsong's captain, a young Karethi officer named Seelith Maru. Control, this is Windsong. We are detecting massive contacts emerging from the quarantine zone. Repeat, massive contact ships, thousands of them. Configuration unknown. They are not responding to hails. They are moving in tight formation at speeds we cannot. Well, they are accelerating. Oh gods. They are. The signal dissolved into static. The communications team tried for 6 hours to reestablish contact with the Windsong. They never did. That night, Voss sat in her chamber and listened to the recording 14 times. Each time she focused on the fear in Captain Maru's voice. Not the fear of someone facing an enemy. The fear of someone seeing something that should not exist. Ships, thousands. Configuration unknown. She looked at the star map again. Vraxith were coming from one direction, and from the opposite direction from the silence that had lasted 4,000 years. Something else was coming. The galaxy was caught between two storms, and the Galactic Council had no idea what either of them truly was. Voss closed her eyes. In 60 days the Vraxith would reach Telesar Prime. In 60 days, everything the Council had built would burn unless something changed. She did not know it yet, but something had already changed, deep in the void, beyond the sensors in the silence. Engines that had been warming for centuries were now burning at full power. A fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen was moving through the dark. They had been watching, they had been waiting, and now at last they had decided to move. The silence of the quarantine zone was over, and what came out of it would change everything. Hive Commander Sithrek the Undying stood on the command platform of his flagship, the Consuming Maw, and looked out at the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen. And GT clears throat. And GT 40,000 warships stretched across the void in every direction by organic dreadnoughts, each one grown from the living flesh of conquered worlds, pulsed with a faint green light as their internal organs pumped fuel through veins of hardened chitin. And GT clears throat. And GT swarm carriers released clouds of fighter drones that moved like schools of fish, turning and diving in perfect Synchronization. Heavy destroyers, all covered in thick plates of regenerating armor, drifted in formation, like sleeping predators waiting to wake. Sithrak was old. He had lived for 600 years, his body rebuilt and repaired by the hive's biological engineers more times than he could remember. He had conquered 11 species. He had eaten their worlds. He had turned their children into soldiers for the swarm. And in all that time, he had never lost a war. The council species were weak. He had known this from the beginning. They talked when they should have fought. They debated when they should have killed. They built beautiful cities and wrote beautiful laws, and none of it mattered because beauty did not win. Wars, strength won wars, hunger won wars, and the Vraxith were always hungry. The Battle of the Yanari corridor had been the final proof. 6,000 council warships, the best they could gather, and his armada had torn through them like claws through soft meat. The path to their capital was open. In 60 days, he would stand on Telesar Prime and feast on the bones of their precious council. But first, there was the matter of the Helix Nebula. The Helix Nebula was a massive cloud of gas and dust that sat between the outer colonies and the inner core of Council space. It was strategically important because any fleet that controlled it could strike in 3 directions at once. Sithrak had sent a vanguard fleet of 8,000 ships to secure it, a simple task. The nebula was undefended. That had been 6 hours ago. The vanguard had not reported back. Sithrak did not feel concern. He felt annoyance. Communication disruptions were common in nebulae, and the dense gas clouds interfered with subspace signals. His vanguard commander, subhive leader Krethar, was competent but cautious. He was probably running sensor sweeps before establishing a communication relay. Still, 6 hours was a long time for 8,000 warships to go silent. Send a secondary fleet, Sithrak ordered. 5,000 ships. Have them enter the nebula and reestablish contact with the vanguard. His officers obeyed without question. 5,000 warships broke formation and accelerated toward the glowing purple clouds of the Helix Nebula. While he waited, Sithrak reviewed intelligence reports on the remaining council defenses. They were pathetic. A few hundred damaged ships hiding behind planetary shields, civilian evacuation, fleets clogging the trade routes, politicians arguing about surrender terms or what. The galaxy was already his. The rest was just cleaning. His thoughts were interrupted by a communication from the intelligence division. Hive Commander, we have intercepted unusual transmissions from the Council's sensor network. They are detecting anomalous energy signatures along the border of a region they designate as the quarantine zone. Sithrak had heard of the quarantine zone, a dead region of space sealed by a species that no longer existed. Irrelevant, he said. Focus on the primary campaign. Acknowledged Hive Commander. Sithrak dismissed it from his mind. Ancient mysteries did not interest him. Only conquest interested him. Far away on Telesar Prime, Magistrate Ithia was not dismissing anything. She had spent the last 48 hours without sleep, her translucent fingers moving across data screens with a speed that would have blurred the eyes of any non-Sindari observer. The anomalies along the quarantine border were getting stronger, more organized, and the pattern they formed was unmistakable. It was a fleet Formation, a very large fleet formation. She had pulled every fragment of information about the quarantine zone from the Council's archives. Most of it was useless. Administrative notes about border patrol, schedules, astronomical surveys of the region's star systems, bureaucratic reports filed by long-dead officials, but buried deep in the oldest files, encrypted in a language that predated the Council by 3,000 years, she found the Valori records. The Valori had been a powerful civilization, advanced, sophisticated. They had helped establish the first version of the Galactic Council before mysteriously declining and eventually going extinct. Their records were considered lost. They were not lost. They were hidden. Ithio broke the encryption in 11 hours. What she found made her sit very still. For a very long time, the Valori had not created the quarantine out of paranoia. They had created it out of terror. The species inside the quarantine zone was called human. They had originated on a single world in a small star system near the edge of the quarantine region. When the Valori first encountered them, the humans were primitive. They had barely achieved spaceflight. They fought wars among themselves with crude weapons. They were messy, chaotic, violent, and divided, and the Valori had studied them for 300 years and concluded that this species was the most dangerous organism they had ever encountered. Not because of their technology, not because of their strength, because of their speed. Humans adapted faster than any species the Valori had ever cataloged. They learned from every defeat. They copied and improved every technology they encountered. They turned their own internal conflicts into engines of innovation. In 300 years of observation, the Valori watched humanity go from chemical rockets to faster-than-light theory. No other species in galactic history had advanced that quickly. The Valori sealed the region and placed warnings on every border. Do not enter, do not make contact, do not let them out. And then the Valori disappeared and everyone forgot. Ithio brought her findings to High Chancellor Voss in a private meeting. Voss listened with her feathered crest slowly rising, a sign of deep distress. In Karith body language, you are telling me, Voss said slowly, that the most advanced civilization in pre-council history sealed an entire region of space to contain a single species, and we have been ignoring that region for 4,000 years. Yes, Chancellor, and now something is coming out of that region. Yes, Chancellor. Voss closed her eyes. If they were quarantined 4,000 years ago as a primitive species, what have they been doing all this time? Ithil had no answer for that. No one did. At that exact moment, the Viraxis secondary fleet reached the Helix Nebula. 5,000 warships entered the nebula. Standard search formation, monitoring by organic sensors reaching out through the gas clouds like fingers in the dark. The fleet commander, sub-hive leader Vren, was experienced and careful. She moved her ship slowly, scanning for any sign of the vanguard. She found them, or rather, she found what was left of them. 8,000 Viraxis warships, each one a living organism, hundreds of meters long, reduced to shattered shells of dead chitin and frozen blood. They drifted through the nebula like a field of broken bones. No power, no life signs, no distress signals. They had died so fast that most of them had not even managed to activate their regeneration systems. Vren had fought in dozens of battles. She had seen destruction before. But this was not destruction, this was erasure. Something had killed 8,000 warships with such speed and violence that the ships had not even had time to fight back, and then she saw the wounds. The holes were not burned, they were torn, massive holes punched clean through the bioarmor by something solid, moving at incredible speed. Kinetic weapons, projectiles, the most primitive form of space warfare, the kind that every advanced civilization had abandoned thousands of years ago. Except someone had not abandoned them. Someone had perfected them. All ships reverse course, Vren ordered. Full retreat. Now, she was too late. They came out of the nebula like shadows given form. Thousands of them, dark, angular. Warships with sharp lines and flat surfaces. No curves, no organic shapes, no decoration. They were built for one purpose, and that purpose was killing. They had no running lights. They broadcast no identification. They sent no warnings. They simply appeared, and then they opened fire. The first volley was railgun slugs. Thousands of metal projectiles, accelerated to a significant fraction of the speed of light. They hit the Vraxeth formation like a wall of invisible hammers, by organic hulls that were designed to absorb energy. Weapons shattered like glass under the kinetic impacts. Ships exploded. Ships broke in half. Ships were punched through from bow to stern, the slugs entering one side and exiting the other, leaving tunnels of destruction through living flesh. The second volley was missiles. Swarms of them, tens of thousands each. One guided by an intelligence that adapted in real time. The missiles did not fly in straight lines. They curved, twisted, split apart, reformed, and found every weak point in the Vraxeth formation. When the bioships tried to regenerate, the missiles targeted the regeneration organ. Specifically, the Vraxeth fought back. Of course they fought. They were the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known. Swarm fighters launched by the thousands, biocannons fired beams of concentrated acid that could melt through any known armor. Boarding pods shot toward the enemy. Ships carrying soldiers bred for close combat. None of it mattered. The enemy ships had point defense systems that filled the space around them with walls of shrapnel. The swarm fighters flew into those walls and died. The acid beams splashed against armor plating that was thick and layered and did not care about biological weapons. The boarding pods were shot down at a distance of 1,000 kilometers long before they could reach their targets. The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it was over, 5,000 Vraxeth warships were debris. Subhive leader Vren was dead. Her crew was dead. Every soldier, every fighter, every drone in the secondary fleet was dead, all except one. A single scout ship, small and fast, had been positioned at the rear of the formation. Its pilot, a young Vraxeth drone with barely enough intelligence to follow orders, had done the only thing it could think of. It ran as fast as its engines could carry it, and by some miracle of luck and distance, the enemy ships did not chase it. The scout reached the Grand Armada 4 hours later and transmitted its sensor recordings directly to Hive Commander Sithrak. Sithrak stood on his command platform and watched the footage. He watched 5,000 of his warships die in 14 minutes. He watched weapons he did not understand tear through armor that was supposed to be indestructible. He watched an enemy fleet move with a coordination and precision that made his own swarm tactics look like children playing games. And he watched the enemy ships reassemble after the battle, forming into a perfect grid formation, their dark hulls reflecting the purple light of the nebula. Silent, patient, waiting. For 600 years, Sithrak the Undying had known nothing but victory. He had consumed worlds. He had broken civilizations. He had never encountered a force that could match the fury of the Vraxith swarm, now standing in the dim green light of his flagship, watching the recording play for the third time. He felt something he had never felt before. It was a cold sensation that started in his primary heart and spread through all four of his subsidiary hearts until his entire body was trembling. Fear. He did not know who they were. He did not know where they came from. He did not know how they had built weapons that could tear through Vraxith bioarmor like it was paper, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: they were still in the nebula, and they were waiting for him. The Hive commander stared at the frozen image of those dark angular ships, and for the first time in his 600 years of life he did not know what to do. The Grand Assembly Hall had never been so full. Every seat was taken, every species was represented. Ambassadors who had recalled their delegations returned. Leaders who had begun evacuation procedures paused them. Even the Feldari, who had already started moving their entire population to deep space stations, sent their most senior representative back to tell us our prime, because the galaxy had just changed and nobody understood how. High Chancellor Voss stood at the central platform. Behind her, the holographic display showed footage that the Council's intelligence network had intercepted from Vraxith communications, the same footage that had made Hive Commander Sithrak tremble. 48 hours ago, Voss began, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. A Vraxith vanguard fleet of 8,000 warships entered the Helix Nebula. They were destroyed. A secondary fleet of 5,000 ships was sent to investigate. They were also destroyed. 13,000 Vraxith warships have been eliminated in a matter of hours. She let the number sit in the air. 13,000 more ships than the Council had lost in 11 years of war, wiped out in less than 2 days, and not by the Council. The attacking force, Voss continued, has been identified as a fleet of approximately 12,000 warships of unknown origin. Their technology does not match any known species. Their weapons are primarily kinetic, which is why the Vraxith bioarmor, designed to resist energy weapons, was ineffective. These ships are faster, more heavily armed, and more coordinated than anything in our database. She activated the footage. The hall watched in silence as dark angular warships emerged from the nebula and tore through the Vraxith formation. Quality of the footage was poor, woody, pulled from the damaged sensors of the single Vraxith scout that had escaped. But it was enough. More than enough. The railgun impacts were visible as bright flashes followed by expanding clouds of debris. The missiles moved like living things, hunting their targets within intelligence that even the Council's most advanced AI systems could not match. And the enemy ships moved together with a precision that was almost beautiful, if you could call something so violent Beautiful. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long time. Admiral Torek Jan broke the silence. His holographic image appeared above the platform, his 6 arms crossed, his stone-gray face unreadable. I have analyzed the engagement footage with my remaining tactical staff. 3 observations. He raised one massive finger. First, the unknown fleet uses exclusively kinetic and physical weapons, railguns, missiles, shrapnel-based point defense. No energy beams, no plasma, no particle weapons. This is not a limitation. This is a choice. Whoever built these ships studied the Vraxeth and designed their weapons specifically to bypass bioorganic regeneration. You cannot heal from a hole that goes clean through you. A second finger. Second, their tactical coordination is beyond anything I have ever. During the engagement, the unknown fleet operated as 12,000 individual units, moving in perfect harmony. No visible communication delay, no formation errors. Either they have a communication system we cannot detect, or their commanders are trained to a standard that makes our best officers look like new recruits. A third finger. Third, and what in this is the part that keeps me awake. They did not lose a single ship, not one. 12,000 ships against 13,000 Vraxeth. And they took 0 casualties. This is not a battle, this is a demonstration. The hall erupted again. Fear, confusion, disbelief, all tangled together in a storm of voices and accusations. Then Magistrate Ithiel rose to speak. The hall went quiet immediately. Ithiel rarely spoke in full sessions. When she did, people listened because what she said usually changed everything. I have completed my analysis of the unknown fleet's communication signatures, she said, her pale face glowing faintly in the holographic light. They are broadcasting on a unified military frequency using encryption protocols we have never encountered. However, certain elements of their transmissions are unencrypted. Our identification codes, fleet designations, administrative signals. She paused. The hall leaned forward. The fleet identifies itself as the Terran Navy, 5th Expeditionary Armada. Silence. Terran, said Ambassador Driffin of the Lyracy, his large black eyes blinking rapidly. That word is not in our linguistic databases. It is in the Vilary archives, Ithiel said. The species within the quarantine zone. The species the Vilary feared enough to seal an entire region of the galaxy. They called themselves humans. Their world of origin was called Earth. In their own language, the word for something from Earth is Terran. The silence that followed was different from before. This was not the silence of confusion. This was the silence of people who were beginning to understand something terrible. Core E, the quarantine zone, said the Feldari ambassador, his crystalline body flickering with agitated light. You are saying these ships came from the quarantine zone? Yes, the region that has been sealed for 4,000 years. Yes. And the species inside it, these humans. They have built a fleet of 12,000 warships that can destroy Vraxeth armadas without taking a single loss. Yes, the Feldari ambassador sat down heavily. His crystal segments made a sound like breaking glass. Admiral Jean spoke again, and his voice was low and dangerous. They did not just build a fleet, they built a fleet to fight this war. They have been watching us, they have. Been watching the Vraxith, and they have. Been preparing for how long? Centuries. Thousands of years. We locked them in a box. And they spent the entire time building weapons inside it. Voss wanted to argue. She wanted to say that they did not know this for certain, that the evidence was incomplete, that there could be another explanation, but she could not, because Jean was right. The weapons were designed to kill Vraxith specifically. That did not happen by accident. Before the council could dissolve into further panic, the strategic display updated with new information from long-range sensors. Hive Commander Sithrak had made his decision. The entire Vraxith Grand Armada, all 40,000 remaining warships, was moving toward the Helix Nebula in full battle formation. Every ship, every fighter, every drone. Sithrak was committing everything he had to destroy the unknown fleet. Voss felt her blood go cold. Nicanor, can our sensors track the engagement? At this range, we will have a 7-minute delay, Ifil said, but yes, we can. Watch. And so the Galactic Council watched. They watched as 40,000 Veraxa warships entered the Helix Nebula like a swarm of insects pouring into a cave. The bioorganic fleet filled the sensor display with green signatures, so many that they blurred together into a solid mass. They watched as the Terran fleet, 12,000 ships against 40,000, did not retreat, did not fall back, did not run. And GT clears throat. And GT. Instead, the Terran fleet did something that no one in the hall understood. It broke apart. The 12,000 ships split into hundreds of small groups, wolf packs. Each group was between 20 and 50 ships, and each one moved independently, scattering through the nebula like sparks from a fire. Within minutes, the neat formation of the Terran fleet had dissolved into what looked like chaos. What are they doing? Voss whispered. Admiral Jean watched with all 6 of his eyes fixed on the display. His tactical mind, trained over decades of warfare, struggled to process what he was seeing, and then slowly understanding dawned. They are denying the Veraxith their advantage, he said. The Veraxith fight as a swarm. They overwhelm enemies with numbers surrounding them and attacking from all directions. But you cannot swarm an enemy that is not there. You cannot surround a target that has split into 500 pieces. The humans have turned a pitch battle into a hunting ground. The wolf pack struck. Each small group targeted isolated sections of the Veraxith formation, hitting hard and fast and then disappearing back into the nebula's gas clouds before the swarm could respond. The railgun slugs were invisible until impact. The missiles came from every direction. The Vraxith tried to regroup, to form their traditional sphere formations, but every time they gathered, a wolf pack would strike the cluster and scatter them again. It was not a battle, it was a controlled demolition of the largest military force in galactic history. The Council watched for 6 hours, 6 hours of green dots disappearing from the display one by one, then in groups, then in waves. 6 hours of Vraxith ships dying by the hundreds, while the Terran wolf packs danced around them, always moving, always striking, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. Sithrak tried everything. He ordered his ships to spread out and the wolf packs picked them off individually. He ordered them to cluster together. The Terran missiles hit the clusters like hammers hitting glass. He sent his swarm fighters ahead in clouds of millions. The Terran point defense systems shredded them before they could reach their targets. Every tactic the Vraxeth tried, the Terrans had already anticipated. Every adaptation the bioships attempted, the Terran weapons had already accounted for. It was as if the humans had spent years studying every possible Vraxeth strategy and preparing a counter for each one. Because they had, by the 5th hour, the Vraxeth were no longer fighting, they were dying. Ships broke formation and tried to flee. Most were hunted down by wolf packs that pursued them with a patience that was almost cruel. The nebula, once a cloud of purple and gold, it was now thick with debris, frozen bodies, and the drifting remains of bioorganic warships that would never regenerate again. By the 6th hour it was over. 38,000 Vraxeth warships were destroyed. The remaining 2,000, including the flagship, consuming maw, fled toward the galactic core at maximum speed. Hive Commander Sithrek the Undying, the conqueror of 11 species, ran from the field of battle for the first time in 600 years. The Terran fleet reassembled in the center of the nebula. Long-range sensors counted them carefully. They had lost approximately 400 ships out of 12,000. 400 against 40,000. The Grand Assembly Hall on Telesar Prime was silent, not a whisper, not a breath. Every delegate, every ambassador, every aide and advisor sat frozen, staring at the display that showed the victorious Terran fleet holding position in the Helix Nebula. Dark ships, silent ships, ships that had just done in 6 hours what the entire Galactic Council could not do in 11 years. High Chancellor Voss stood at her platform. Her hands were shaking. Her feathered crest was flat against her skull. She stared at the display and felt something she had never felt before. Not fear of the Vraxeth. That fear was gone. The Vraxeth were finished. This was a new fear, a deeper fear. She turned to face the council and said the words that everyone was already thinking, but no one had the courage to speak. The Vraxeth are defeated, but there are 12,000 warships in the Helix Nebula that do not belong to us, that we cannot match, and that we know almost nothing about. She paused, and her voice dropped to barely whisper. What do we do when they turn those guns toward us? No one had an answer. The display continued to glow behind her. The Terran fleet sat in the nebula, dark and silent, impatient, waiting. The debate lasted 3 days. 3 days of screaming, accusations, proposals, counter-proposals, and fear. The Galactic Council, which had barely held itself together during 11 years of war with the Vraxeth, was now tearing itself apart over a fleet that had saved them. The Feldari ambassador wanted to offer total submission. They are clearly superior, he said, his crystalline body dim with resignation. We should acknowledge their dominance now before they decide to demonstrate it against us. Send a delegation, Bo, offer whatever they want: territory, resources, technology. Our survival depends on their goodwill. The Drathari War Council disagreed violently. We should strike first, said General Horibek, scarred veteran who had replaced Admiral Jean as the senior military voice after Jean had taken a leave of absence to mourn his fallen fleet. While they are still in the nebula, while they are still recovering from battle, we gather every remaining ship in council space and hit them before they can move. Admiral Jean returned to his holographic seat for the suggestion. His expression was flat. General, we have approximately 300 functional warships remaining. They have 12,000, and those 12,000 just destroyed 40,000 Braxith with 400 losses. If we attack them, we will not even inconvenience them. If we will simply give them a reason. Then what do you suggest? Horribic snarled. Jean looked tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. I suggest we admit that we are not the most powerful civilization in this galaxy, that we never were, and that we act accordingly. The Sindari has always urged caution and intelligence gathering. Magistrate Ithiel wanted to send unmanned probes to collect data on the Terran fleet before making any decisions. The Larasi wanted to open a diplomatic channel and negotiate from a position of neutral respect. It was High Chancellor Voss who cut through the noise. I will go myself, she said. The hall went silent. I will take a single diplomatic vessel. No weapons, no escort. I will fly to the Helix Nebula and make direct contact with the Terran fleet. She looked around the chamber. I'm meeting every pair of eyes, every optical sensor, every psychic impression. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it already. They fought the Vraxith, not us. That tells me something. I intend to find out what it tells you. Nothing, Kravik said. It tells you they wanted to eat the Vraxith first, perhaps, Voss replied, in which case I will die and you can proceed with your suicidal attack plan with a clear conscience. No one argued after that. The diplomatic vessel Silverwing departed Telesur Prime. 6 hours later, it was a small ship, elegant and unarmed, designed for exactly this kind of mission. Voss brought a crew of 10, and including Magistrate Ithiel and a young Karethi translator named Peril, who spoke 14 languages and was currently learning 15th from the fragments of Terran transmissions Ithiel had intercepted. The journey to the Helix Nebula took 2 days, 2 days of silence and preparation. Voss spent most of it reading the Velori records over and over, searching for any clue about what kind of people they humans might be. The records were clinical and detached. They described humans as adaptive, aggressive, tribal, creative, and unpredictable. They noted that humans formed intense emotional bonds with each other and with other species, including animals on their home world. They noted that humans were capable of extreme violence and extreme compassion, sometimes within the same individual, sometimes within the same hour. And the Velori had not known what to make of them. After 300 years of observation, their final report had simply said, we cannot predict what they will become. We can only ensure that whatever they become it far from us. So much for that plan, Voss thought. The Silverwing entered the Helix Nebula on the 3rd day. Almost immediately, the crew began to see the wreckage of the battle. Pieces of Raxith ships floated everywhere. Chunks of dead bioarmor, frozen clouds of organic fluid that had once been blood. The remains of 40,000 warships spread across billions of kilometers of space. And among the wreckage, the Terran fleet waited. Voss stood at the observation window and got her first real look at a human warship. It was terrifying, not because it was monstrous or grotesque. The opposite. It was simple, brutally efficiently. Simple. Dark gray hull plating, thickened. Layered covered every surface, weapon. Batteries lined the ship like teeth. Rows upon rows of railgun turrets and missile launchers, more weapons on a single vessel than most council ships. Carried on 10. There were no decorative elements, no windows, no markings except a small white symbol on the bow that Peril identified as the Terran naval insignia. An anchor crossed with stars. These ships were not built to impress. They were not built to intimidate. They were built to function. Every line, every angle, every plate of armor served a purpose. There was no waste, no excess. Just purpose refined to its purest form. They build their ships the way Predator builds its body, Ithiel murmured, nothing unnecessary. Everything lethal, the Silverwing broadcast a standard diplomatic hail on all frequencies in every language the Council knew, plus the fragments of Terran language that Peril had pieced together. For 20 minutes there was no response. Voss felt her heart beating in her throat, then a signal came back. Clean, clear, and in perfect council. Standard, the common language used for interspecies communication. Diplomatic vessel Silverwing, this is the Terran Navy vessel TNS Defiance. You are cleared to approach. Docking coordinates are being transmitted to your navigation system. Admiral Wren will receive your delegation in Bay 7. Welcome. The voice was calm, professional, almost warm. It sounded like someone who had been expecting them. The Silverwing docked with a massive Terran warship when I vessel that sensor readings identified as a fleet carrier nearly 4 km long. The docking bay was clean, well lit, and organized with a precision that bordered on obsessive. Every surface was labeled, every tool was in its place. Crew members in dark gray uniforms moved with quiet efficiency, acknowledging the ale. Visitors with nods but no stares. Voss had expected many things. She had expected hostility, curiosity perhaps, even amusement. She had not expected professionalism. These people acted as if receiving an alien diplomatic delegation was a routine Tuesday. A tall woman was waiting at the end of the docking bay. She wore the same dark gray uniform as the others, but with additional markings on her shoulders and chest that indicated rank. She was older, perhaps 60 standard years, by human measurement, and with short, silver hair and eyes that were sharp and steady and missed nothing. High Chancellor Voss, the woman said, extending her hand in what Peril quickly whispered was a human greeting gesture. I am Admiral Callister Wren, commanding officer of the 5th Expeditionary Armada. Thank you for coming. Voss took the hand carefully. The human's grip was firm, warm, the hand of a person who was used to being in control. Admiral Wren, Voss said, I represent the Galactic Council of Unified Species. I have come to ask a question that my entire civilization needs answered. I expected you would, Wren said. She gestured toward a doorway. Walk with me, we can talk. They walked through the corridors of the carrier. The ship was enormous, and every section they passed through reinforced the same impression. Function over form, sheer strength over beauty. The walls were lined with sealed compartments, each one labeled with clear, efficient text. Armory, medical, engineering, tactical. This was not a ship of exploration or diplomacy. This was a machine of war, crewed by People who understood war deeply and personally. Ren led them to a briefing room. A large table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs designed for human proportions. Adjustments had been made, Voss noticed. 2 chairs had been modified to accommodate Karith anatomy. Someone had prepared for this meeting in advance. They sat. Ren poured a cup of dark liquid from a metal container and offered some to Voss, who declined politely. Ithil stood in the corner, watching everything with her pale, unblinking eyes. "Ask your question, Chancellor," Ren said. Voss did not hesitate. "Why? Why did you come? Why did you fight the Varaxith? What do you want?" Ren sipped her drink. She took her time. When she spoke, her voice was measured and direct. 4,200 years ago, the Valori civilization sealed our region of space and cut us off from the rest of the galaxy. We were young, primitive. We didn't even fully understand what had happened. By the time we figured it out, the Valori were gone, and the quarantine was maintained by automated systems and council policy. She set down her cup. We could have broken out. We had the technology within 1,000 years, but we chose not to. Instead, we turned inward. We colonized every world, every moon, every asteroid in our region. We built, we grew, we innovated, and we listened. Listened, Voss asked. Your communications are not as secure as you believe. Chancellor, we have been intercepting council transmissions for over 3,000 years. We know your languages, we know your politics, we know your history. We watched you build your council. We watched you make peace between species that had fought for generations. We watched you create something admirable. The word hung in the air, admirable, and we watched the Vraxith come. Ren continued. We watched your defense fleet form. We watched your battles. We ran projections. Our intelligence analysts concluded that the council would fall within 15 years of the Vraxith invasion. The Vraxith would then consolidate, expand, and eventually reach our borders. She looked Voss directly in the eyes. We did not come to save you, Chancellor. We came because the Vraxith were going to be our problem eventually, and we just decided to solve it early. The honesty of it hit Voss like a physical blow. No noble speeches, no grand ideology, no claim of brotherhood or shared destiny. Just cold, clear, strategic logic. You could have intervened years ago. Voss said. You could have saved millions of lives. Something flickered across Ren's face. Shadow, a crack in the professional mask. Yes, she said quietly. We could have. That debate was had. It was not a simple decision, and I will not pretend it was. Voss studied the human admiral. Behind those steady eyes she saw something complicated, regret perhaps, or the weight of a choice that had cost more than anyone would ever know. What happens now? Voss asked. Do you want a seat on the council? Ren considered this, an observer role. She said, for now, while we will contribute to collective security and share limited technology transfers, but our sovereign space remains sovereign. We are not ready to fully integrate with the galaxy, and frankly, the galaxy is not ready for us. Voss nodded slowly. It was a reasonable answer, careful, controlled. Like everything about these humans. As the delegation prepared to leave, Voss paused at the docking bay. She looked back at the endless corridors of the Terran warship, at the quiet efficient crew, at the weapons that had ended a war in days. Admiral, she said, one last question. Your fleet designation, the 5th Expeditionary Armada. That implies there are at least 4 others. Wren's expression did not change. Yes. Where are they? Positioned along other sections of the quarantine border, standard deployment. Voss turned to Ithiel. Have our long-range sensors detected anything? Ithiel's translucent face had gone very still. Chancellor, I received updated sensor reports during our visit. There are 4 additional fleet concentrations positioned along the quarantine zone border. Each one appears to be significantly larger than this fleet. Voss looked at Wren. Wren looked back. Her expression was perfectly, politely, terrifyingly neutral. Voss boarded the Silver Wing without another word. As the diplomatic vessel pulled away from the Terran carrier, Voss stood at the observation window and watched the dark fleet shrink into the distance. 12,000 warships, the 5th Armada, the smallest one. She thought about Wren's words. We are not ready to fully integrate with the galaxy, and the galaxy is not ready for us. But for the first time since the Vraxith invasion began, Voss was not afraid of the enemy, she was afraid of the ally. 6 months passed, and the galaxy became a different place. The Vraxith Dominion, which had terrorized the Council for over a decade, ceased to exist in a matter of weeks after the Battle of the Helix. Nebula. Terran hunter-killer groups, small fleets of fast warships operating with ruthless efficiency, pursued the fleeing Vraxith remnants across the galactic arm and into the core systems where the Hive worlds pulsed with dark organic life. Hive Commander Sithrak, the Undying, made his last stand at Braxis Prime, the oldest and largest of the Hive worlds. He gathered every remaining ship, every soldier, every drone that still answered to the swarm, and it amounted to fewer than 1,000 warships and several billion ground troops burrowed into the living surface of the planet. The Terran Navy did not send ground troops. They did not need to. From orbit, kinetic bombardment platforms launched rods of dense metal alloy at the planet's surface. The rods fell through the atmosphere at terminal velocity, striking with the force of nuclear weapons but leaving no radiation. Each impact shattered Hive structures that had taken centuries to grow. The bombardment lasted 4 days. When it was over, the surface of Braxis Prime was cratered, silent and dead. Sithrak the Undying finally lived up to his name by dying in the ruins of his own throne chamber, buried under 1,000 tons of collapsed chitin. No one mourned him. No one even found the body. The war that had raged for 11 years was ended by humanity in 7 months. The galaxy did not know whether to celebrate or panic. Most species did both often at the same time. On Telesar Prime, the Galactic Council struggled to find its footing in this new reality. The old power structures, built on the assumption that the Council was the supreme authority in known space, no longer applied. There was something bigger now, something that had been bigger for a very long time. High Chancellor Voss worked tirelessly. She held meetings, brokered agreements, and managed the fears of 42 species who were simultaneously grateful and terrified. The Feldari wanted Terran technology. The Drathari wanted Terran weapons. The Larasi wanted Terran protection guarantees. The Sindri wanted Terran intelligence data, or everyone wanted something from the humans, and the humans, true to Admiral Rin's word, shared only what they chose to share. Limited technology transfers began. Medical advances mostly. The humans had developed treatments for diseases that Council scientists had been fighting for centuries. Cancer, genetic degradation, cellular aging. They shared these freely and without condition, which confused the Council. Species who were accustomed to technology exchanges being complex. Political negotiations. Why give this away for free, Voss? Asked the Terran Observer delegate. Quiet man named James Park, who had taken the observer seat at the Council, with the calm demeanor of someone attending a routine staff meeting. Park had smiled. Because letting people die of diseases we cured 2,000 years ago would make us something we don't want to be. It was the kind of answer that made Voss's head spin. These humans were impossible to categorize. They built weapons that could crack planets, and then they gave away medicine for free. They maintained a military that dwarfed the combined forces of 42 civilizations. And then they sent a polite, soft-spoken diplomat to sit in a corner of the assembly hall and take notes. Magistrate Ethio, meanwhile, was conducting the most comprehensive intelligence assessment in Council history. She had been given limited access to publicly available Terran data, and she combined this with 3,000 years of intercepted communications, sensor data, and an analysis to build a picture of what humanity had become behind the quarantine barrier. The report she presented to the Council's inner circle was classified at the highest level. Only 7 beings in the galaxy were authorized to read it. What it contained was staggering. Humanity's quarantine zone, now officially redesignated as Terran sovereign space, contained over 800 colonized worlds. 800, the entire Galactic Council with its 42 member species and 10,000 years of expansion had colonized roughly 3,000 worlds. Humanity, working alone within a sealed region of space, had colonized 800 in 4 millennia. Their population was estimated at 3 trillion individuals. Their industrial output exceeded the entire Council's production capacity by a factor of 12. They had built orbital habitats, asteroid mining operations, gas giant harvesting platforms, and artificial worlds that rivaled natural planets, size and complexity. And their military was beyond anything the Council had imagined in its worst projections. The Terran Navy operated 9 full expeditionary armadas. The 5th, which had fought at the Helix Nebula, was the smallest with 12,000 ships. The 1st and 2nd armadas, stationed near the center of Terran sovereign space, each contained over 30,000 warships. Total estimated naval strength across all 9 armadas exceeded 150,000 combat vessels. 150,000. The number was so large that when Ethio presented it, Admiral Zhuan had laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh that comes when reality becomes so absurd that the only response is to lose your mind a little. We spent thousands of years believing we locked a primitive species behind a fence, Zhuan said. We locked ourselves out of their territory while they became gods. But the military numbers, as terrifying as they were not the most alarming part of the report. The technology section was Humanity had developed faster than light. Drives that operated on principles the Council had never conceived. Their slipstream drives, as they called them, were approximately 3 times faster than the best Council hyperdrives. This meant that a Terran fleet could cross the galaxy in a third of the time it took a Council fleet. If they ever decided to move aggressively, no one could outrun them. They had mastered artificial gravity manipulation at a level that Council physicists had considered theoretically impossible. Their ships could generate indirect gravitational fields for propulsion shielding and, theoretically as weapons, a ship that could create a localized gravity well could crush an enemy vessel without firing a single shot. Their computing technology was built around artificial intelligences of a sophistication that the Council had banned millennia ago out of fear. Terran military AI systems managed logistics, targeting, communication, and tactical coordination across entire armadas. The Wolfpack tactics that had destroyed the Vraxic Grand Armada had been coordinated in real time by AI systems that could process and react to battlefield changes in milliseconds. And then there was the final item in the report, the one that Ethio had saved for last, the one that made even the unshakable Sindari magistrate's voice tremble slightly. Humanity had developed planet-cracking weapons, devices capable of destabilizing a world's core and breaking it apart. They had tested them. The evidence was visible in Terran sovereign space, where the remnants of a shattered moon orbited one of their colony worlds, clearly the result of a controlled demolition. They had built these weapons, they had tested these weapons, and they had chosen not to use them against the Vraxith. That choice, more than anything else in the report, told Ethio what kind of species humanity really was. They had the power to destroy worlds and the discipline not to. That combination was either the most reassuring or the most terrifying thing in the galaxy, depending on how much you trusted their discipline to hold. The inner circle read the report in silence. When they finished, no one spoke for a long time. Voss broke the silence. I am going to meet with Admiral Wren one final time. No one objected. The meeting took place on a neutral station, a small trading post on the border of what was now Terran sovereign space. Voss came alone. Wren came with a single aide who waited outside the room. They sat across from each other at a plain metal table. Wren looked the same as before, calm, steady, unreadable. But Voss had spent her life reading people, and she thought she saw something different in the Admiral's eyes this time, something that looked like weariness. I have read the intelligence report on your civilization, Voss said, so I will not pretend it did not frighten me. It should, Wren said. We frighten ourselves sometimes. Voss studied her. I need to ask you a question that I have no right to ask, and I need an honest answer. Ask, do you intend to conquer the galaxy? Wren was quiet for a moment. She looked down at her hands folded on the table. They were the hands of a woman who had commanded fleets and ordered the deaths of millions. They were also the hands of a woman who was very tired. Chancellor, she said, if we wanted to conquer you, we would have done it. Centuries ago, we had the ships, we had the technology, we had the strategic advantage of complete surprise, and we chose not to. She looked up. We watched you build Your council, your laws, your alliances. When we watched you take 42 species that had every reason to hate each other and convince them to work together, it was imperfect, it was slow, it was frustrating to observe, but it was admirable. That word again, admirable. We do not want to rule the galaxy, Ren said. We want to live in it. We want to trade, explore, discover, and grow. But we also refuse to let anyone burn it down, not the Braxith, not anyone who comes after them. We have the power to prevent it, and so we accept the responsibility. Boss felt something shift inside her. Not trust exactly, trust would take years to build, but something adjacent to it, respect perhaps, or recognition. The recognition that this woman and the civilization she represented had made a choice that was far more difficult than conquest. They had chosen restraint, and restraint, we as boss knew from a lifetime of diplomacy, was always harder than force. I would like to offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Council, boss said. Ren nodded. We accept on our terms. The terms were negotiated over the following weeks. Humanity would join as the 43rd member species. They would contribute to collective defense and share limited technology, primarily medical and agricultural. They would participate in diplomacy and trade, but Terran sovereign space would remain closed to outside traffic unless specific permission was granted. Humanity would integrate at its own pace, on its own schedule. The Council accepted. They had no real choice, but Voss made sure the vote was conducted with dignity and proper procedure. If humanity was going to join the galactic community, it would be done right. When the announcement was broadcast across every communication network in council space, Voss stood at the central platform of the Grand Assembly Hall, the same platform where she had received news of the Yanari corridor disaster just months earlier and addressed the galaxy. For 11 years we fought a war we could not win. We lost ships, worlds, and people. We came within weeks of total destruction. And then clears throat from a region of space we had ignored for 4,000 years. Help came from a source we never expected. She paused and looked at the 43 flags, now hanging from the ceiling. The newest one was simple, a blue circle on a dark field with a single white star at its center. Today I am honored to welcome the Terran Confederation as the 43rd member of the Galactic Council of Unified Species. When they are not what we expected, they are not what the ancient records described. They are something new, something we are still learning to understand. She straightened her crest and spoke her final words with a voice that carried across 1,000 worlds. For 4,000 years, we told ourselves that the silence beyond the quarantine zone meant Clear's throat. There was nothing there. Let this be the lesson the galaxy never forgets. Silence does not mean absence. It means someone is choosing not to speak, and when they finally speak, you had better listen. The hall erupted in applause, not the polite, measured applause of diplomatic protocol. Real applause, the kind that comes from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming feeling of having survived something that should have killed you. Eva Voss stepped down from the platform and found Ethio waiting for her. Do you trust them? Ethio asked. No, Voss said, but I respect them and I believe that they believe what they told us. For now, that is enough. Far away, deep in Terran sovereign space, Admiral Callista, Wren returned home. Her shuttle descended through a blue sky. Scattered with white clouds, below her a green and brown landscape stretched to the horizon. Rivers cut through valleys, cities rose from plains, gleaming with lights that reflected off glass and steel. And between the cities there were forests, fields, and oceans that had existed for billions of years before anyone had thought to build a starship. Earth, the world that the galaxy had forgotten, the world that had refused to forget itself. Wren's shuttle landed at a small airfield outside a city that was old by human standards but a heartbeat by galactic ones. She stepped out into the sunlight and breathed air that tasted like grass and rain and home. She walked through a park. Children were playing on a green lawn, chasing each other and laughing in the way that children everywhere on every world and every species have always laughed. An old dog slept in a patch of sunlight. A couple sat on a bench talking quietly about nothing important. Wren sat on an empty bench beneath an oak tree that was older than most civilizations in the galaxy. She closed her eyes and felt the sun on her face. Her communicator buzzed. Another report, another crisis, another galaxy that needed managing. The Vraxuth remnants, the council integration, trade negotiations, border disputes. 1,000 problems that would never stop coming because the universe was messy and complicated, and that was just how things worked. She silenced the communicator and put it in her pocket. For one moment she was not an admiral, she was not a strategist, she was not the woman who had ended a galactic war. She was just a person sitting in the sun on a small blue world that had been written off by the rest of the galaxy 4,000 years ago. A child's ball rolled to her feet. Small girl ran over, picked it up, and looked at Wren with wide, curious eyes. "Are you a soldier?" the girl asked. Wren smiled. "Sometimes." "Do you fight bad guys?" "I try." The girl nodded seriously as if this was the most important information she had received all day. Then she ran back to her friends, and then the sound of laughter filled the park again. Wren leaned back against the bench. Oak tree rustled above her. Somewhere, impossibly far away, the galaxy was spinning with all its wars and wonders and terrors and triumphs. But here, in this park on this world, under this tree, there was only the sun, the wind, and the sound of children laughing. She closed her eyes and she smiled.